Season 3 of Vanguard's Reign of Warzone has brought to it a colour palette and graphics change. And I don't know about you, but I think we desperately needed it. All of the colours previously kind of felt a little saturated and washed into one another, making it very hard to see people sometimes. The colours to me actually seemed very similar to those that were added to Verdansk when we had the Cold War update and we went to that Verdansk 1984. Thankfully now, after this change, we do see a lot more shades of green, which is great since Caldera is essentially a jungle map. And because we do now have those extra shades of green, they actually are distinguishable from one another, making it a little easier to see. On top of that, we now see a lot of darker colours looking a little crisper too. Just take a look at Peak and Capital alone, they're looking great. Now, despite these great visual changes to Warzone, there are still things we can do on our end to make the game look even better. Obviously, because there has been this huge change to visuals, we need to align our settings to match those. So we're talking about ways to see people clearer and make the map more beautiful, whether that's on Caldera or Rebirth Island. Now, sadly on consoles we don't have a huge amount of settings to play with, however we can tweak things on our monitors and TVs. Some monitors have built-in modes specifically for gaming and first-person shooters. I recommend having a little play around with your monitor or TV settings after we've changed our Warzone settings. This way you can try and get extra little features to just pop out. For example, sharpness you can't control in your in-game settings, but on a monitor you absolutely can. Often putting sharpness up just a little bit makes textures and visuals just seem that little bit clearer. But this is just an example, and be careful not to put up your sharpness setting too much because you do get tearing and then ultimately poor visuals. Getting settings like this right though can help you make out the difference between a foreground and a background, which in some instances just ends up being an enemy, so can help you get more kills. Now let's get stuck into our console settings, and specifically we're going to try and increase our frames per second. For next gen consoles, so we're talking about the Xbox Series X and S and the PS5, we were supposed to be able to run Warzone at 120 frames per second. But since an update a few months ago now, Xbox Series X and S can no longer run Warzone at 120 FPS, and they're now capped at 60 FPS. So for a short period, Xbox Series X and S absolutely could run Warzone at 120 FPS, but clearly at the moment there is some issue preventing that, and it seems to be on Microsoft's end. There should be an update on the horizon to run Warzone at 120 FPS again for those next-gen Xbox consoles, but for the moment, we're just not sure when that update will be. For PS5 players though, make sure you have enabled your 120Hz output as auto, and then on the main system settings menu, we want to go on saved data and game/app settings and change game presets to performance mode. By turning these settings on, your PS5 will automatically play games at 120 FPS when possible, and that includes Warzone. For the last gen consoles, so we're talking about Xbox One and PS4, unfortunately you are capped at 60 FPS. And of course, everybody is capped at whatever frame rates their monitor or TV can actually run at. Most casual gamers or players will likely have a monitor or TV that runs at 60 or 75 Hz. So this basically means they can max out to either 60 frames per second or 75 frames per second. So if their console can run at 120 frames per second, for example, on PS5, but their monitor is only on 75 Hz, they're only going to be running 75 frames per second. So that extra performance on your system is sometimes meaningless unless you've got a monitor to match. So now that we've got our consoles and monitors running in harmony, let's dive into some in-game settings on Warzone. So to access the visual settings in Warzone, we want to open up Settings, go across to Graphics, then click Start, where we open up accessibility. Then there we have brightness, which is absolutely one of the most important settings that is in our control on Warzone. And thankfully at the moment, you can basically follow the advice that Call of Duty gives you in the settings. So for example, where we have the recommendation of making the MW sign barely visible, that's actually a pretty good path to follow at the moment. So I'm running 50 brightness at the moment, so right in the middle, and sometimes even a little bit lower than that. This is great because back on Verdansk, we used to have to crank it up to about 65 or even higher just because of those dark corners. The downside to doing that was that the brighter areas of the map just looked terrible and completely saturated and washed out. After the Season 3 update on Caldera though, things are really looking great. Now on to colorblind settings, which we can change on the game as well as on our consoles. This again is where some of the largest visual changes are made. Having it on disabled isn't actually as bad of an idea as it previously was on Call of Duty. This new color palette actually isn't too bad just on its own. However, I do still recommend running Deuteranopia. I do highly recommend staying away from Protanopia and Tritanopia though. These settings either put too many greens onto the palette on an already very green map, making it hard to see, or essentially, in the case of Tritanopia, just put a red tinge on everything. Deuteranopia, on the other hand, just works with the existing new color palette, highlighting and accentuating already existing colors and just making things pop out that little bit more. On top of these settings, you can go onto your console and change color settings that way too. On the Xbox Series X and S, you can go to your general settings, then go to video fidelity, then increase your color depth bits per pixel. I'm not too sure if this is an option on Xbox One too, but I don't think it is. Then for PS5, they have extended colorblind settings. So we want to go through accessibility, where again you have the choice of Deuteranopia, Tritanopia and all that kind of thing, and that's just in case you want to emphasize some of those colors that little bit more. Now we've got the brightness and colors of our game down, we want to go into how we can actually change and improve the graphics. So we want to go into the Warzone settings again, and we'll start with camera movement. Puts this down to the lowest it will go, and that's 50%. The game may look a little less realistic on 50%, but it's so much easier to spot important things in the environment, whether that's loot or enemies. The exact same can be said of weapon and world motion blur, as well as film grain. They can make the game look really cool and theatrical, but ultimately they can make you miss things out. And sometimes noticing something on your screen a few milliseconds faster can be the difference between life and death. Okay, now lastly, let's talk about the quality of graphics on Warzone. Previously, we had the option of downloading HD texture packs to improve our graphics on Warzone that way. However, these days we do it completely differently, and we do it through the in-game setting of on-demand texture streaming. If you've got a good enough connection and bandwidth available, I absolutely recommend putting this setting on high. It can make the game look beautiful, but make sure you've got at least 8 GB spare on your console. From the tests I've done, the impacts on your latency and connection are actually quite minimal when you put the setting on high. Of course, if you haven't got the best connection and you sometimes get lag and maybe drop off, put this setting on standard or turn it off completely. Turning off this setting completely anyway might be the best option for you if you're just concerned with your connection and having the best game possible that way. And by the way, if you do ever have visual bugs on Caldera or Warzone in general, turning off your on-demand texture streaming is absolutely a good thing to do. This was the piece of advice I gave to many of you at the start of Caldera, and it still works today on some of the older gen consoles. I hope this video helped you see Warzone that little bit better, and now that you've got your game looking beautiful, why don't you check out this video to make sure you're ranking up your weapons as fast as possible. See ya!